This video will look at English Language Unit 2, and this particular video is going to focus on how to answer the A1 reading question. You have 1 hour in which to answer all questions in section A. You'll notice that you have 3 questions. So the way that you should divide your time should be for 15 minutes for reading time and then 15 minutes per question. You should read the questions carefully in that first 15 minutes and also read the information that you have about the text, in the resource materials. If we then look at the A1 question, it says read lines 1 to 29 of The Lion King by Georgie Thompson on the opposite page. So the first thing that you should do is to check which text you're going to be answering on first, and if it directs you within the text. So here, for example, it advises you to read lines 1 to 29. And as you've always done in the past, you must stick to that particular section. Okay, A1. What did Georgie Thompson think and feel during her visit to the Shamwari Reserve? So what you must do is read the question carefully and highlight all of the key words. It also advises you in italics to make sure that you use evidence from the text to support your answers. The second question, A2, asks you to look at the other article in the resource material, the separate resource material. It says, now read the article South Africa's Animal Reserve by Britt Collins in the separate resource material. How does Britt Collins try to show that Shamwari Reserve is an important force for good? And again, you should be checking the instructions for the next text and making sure that in your answer you use evidence from the text to support your ideas. If we then look at the third question, it is often the case in the third question that you'll be asked to look at both texts. So it says to answer the next question you will need to refer to both texts. Compare and contrast. So compare is what's similar, contrast is what's different. What the two writers say about Johann Joubert. We will now look in detail at question A1. Read lines 1 to 29 of The Lion King by Georgie Thompson on the opposite page. So the first thing that you should ask yourself is, does the question tell you where to look? And then with your highlighter you mark off that particular section. Also, double check that you're using the right text. It will indicate that you should be looking at The Lion King by Georgie Thompson. It then asks you, what did Georgie Thompson think and feel during her visit to Shamwari Reserve? So the first thing you should look at is, whose point of view are you looking at or for? The next thing is to note this particular phrase, think and feel, during her visit to Shamwari Reserve. So you should think about, some thoughts will be obvious, whereas others will be suggested. You'll also note that this is a 10-mark question, and remember that I said on the previous slide that you should be spending 15 minutes on a 10-mark question. And it also indicates in italics that you must use evidence from the text to support your answer. Make sure that you're using clear, short quotations to support the points that you make. So at this point, what you should do is pause the video and read through this particular section. Remember, we're talking about thoughts and feelings. So if we look at some of these highlighted phrases, it says never get the chance. So that means that she thinks she's privileged, lucky to have this chance. If we also look at the phrase remind you of the place in the world and into perspective, so it feels as if it's a good reminder of your own insignificance. And then if we look at the no fence or then from us, then obviously she feels quite exposed and vulnerable. So what you should be doing is, when you look at the section that you're focusing on, in this instance we're looking at 1 to 29, you get your highlighter and you highlight those thoughts and feelings. And I suppose you're looking for about 8 to 10. And then the the words and phrases that you highlight, you can then use as evidence to support your ideas. Here we have a beginning to an A1 answer. Thompson thinks she is privileged to be offered the opportunity to go to the reserve because many people will never get the chance to do something like this. She feels that a safari holiday puts life into perspective and reminds you of your place in the world, reminding you of your own insignificance in relation to nature. She thinks the lions are ferocious when they hunt and kill and feels exposed and vulnerable because there is no fence to keep them from us. So there's an example. We're using the phrases thinks and feels, which is taken directly from the question itself, and also we've got these quotations that show that you're using evidence from the text, and you should aim to use embedded quotations, point evidence explanation, but also shorter quotations to show that you're really focused on the actual text itself. So what you should do now is time yourself over 10 minutes, tracking through the rest of the extract, and try to see if you can identify as many points as you can, and try to complete the answer. And use this particular opening as a model. So what I'm saying to you is this model that you have here is a good example, and you'll be very successful if you follow this example to the end of the question. So let's have a look at the bandings. 5 to 7, that's going to be your C grade and above. So according to quality, to those who select a range of appropriate detail from the text to show clear understanding. The answers should show cohesion and coherence. And then if we look at 8 to 10, which is going to be AA star, according to quality, to those who select appropriate detail from the text to sustain a valid interpretation. You should be aiming as well to comment on the beginning of the extract, the middle of the extract, and the end of it as well, to show that you've got good coverage of the section that you've been asked to focus on. These answers should be thorough as well as methodical, covering a range of points accurately. So look for clarity and cohesion in these answers. So if you've had a go yourself, if you read through this slide, it identifies for you the things that you should have picked up. And here you have an example of a response. After reading the text, I get the impression that Georgie Thompson absolutely loved the visit to Shamwari Reserve. The visit was a fantastic opportunity for Thompson. We didn't think twice. This shows me that Thompson jumped at the chance to visit Shamwari Reserve as it's such a special and rare opportunity. There is also a strong sense of danger at the Shamwari Reserve. We were grateful for the space that kept them from making us breakfast. Thompson tells me that she's aware of the threat that these lions pose to the visitors at the reserve. There is a lot of tension at the Shamwari Reserve because of the pure unpredictability of these animals and their surroundings. And so it continues. So again, you can see an example here of a good answer. This particular response is arguably a better response. It's more succinct, it's more to the point, and it's using the phrases thinks and feels. So Georgie Thompson thought she was lucky to have been offered to visit the Shamwari Reserve because many people don't get the chance, what her and her flatmate experience. She didn't think twice when she was offered. Georgie Thompson thinks that there is nothing like a safari holiday to remind you of your place in the world, and it tends to put life, particularly your own, into perspective. On her first game drive, she thought her days were numbered. When her guide left them on an edge, she felt she was small, because there was no fence to stop the lions getting to them. She was also grateful for the space that kept them from making us breakfast, and her mortality was made clear by the lions. She felt a sense of danger while on safari, and that sense of danger and unpredictability is one of its key attractions. She also thought you can make a safari holiday more magical by enjoying it in extreme luxury. So, why is it successful? It tracks through, it's using quotations as evidence, it's using the phrases thinks and feels, very succinct and to the point. It tells you exactly what you need to know and then supports and backs it up with evidence. Remember that on English language you're not looking to analyse the language in the same way as you would on an English literature paper. It's a test of your reading ability, so for you to read and interpret and comment on the information.